Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Let's Eat. I have to be fully transparent with you. I cannot for the life of me find the attachment for my microphone. So we are literally just talking right into the computer here. I hope the audio is okay, but I simply cannot find it, and it's kind of a crisis, but we're going to make it work because today's episode of the podcast features my friend and fellow health coach, Ali Fiorella. Ali and I met, I want to say last year at some point in time, and we have been essentially colleagues in the health and wellness coaching space. And so it was long overdue that I invited Ali to join me on Let's Eat. Ali is super passionate and super knowledgeable about all things gut health. So that is the focus of our conversation today. We dive into all areas and aspects of lifestyle as it relates to gut health. And Ali shares insights on her journey, which I think is so inspiring, and also sheds light on what is commonly happening in our healthcare system, especially in the world of GI. And she shares more about how this inspired her decision to step into the world of health and wellness. So, thank you for being here. I hope that you love this episode. Details to connect with Ali are in the show notes, and let's eat. Welcome to Let's Eat. I'm your host, Emily, certified holistic health coach, functional nutrition expert, and self-proclaimed wellness enthusiast, here to meet you at the intersection of physical and mental health, the space within which we become well. This podcast is meant to explore all areas of mind and body wellness, designed to offer you the integrative knowledge, behavioral strategies, and mindset shifts necessary to uplevel your health and feel better today. We'll explore nutrition, sleep, movement, self-care and stress management, habits and routines, self-development, gut health, mental health, and more. I am so happy that you're here. Welcome to the table. Let's eat. Hi, Ali. Thank you so much for being here today. This has been a long time coming, so I'm really excited to have you here.
I'm so happy to be here with you today, talking to someone who is a friend and like a business bestie. This is going to be a really
Yes.
great conversation. So thank you for
Yes.
having me.
Of course, of course. So let's get started by talking a little bit about what started you in health and wellness. I think a lot of us end up becoming inspired to enter this field based on our own journeys. So tell us a little bit about your journey.
Sure. So I guess I was at a point in my health where I felt like I was going through the motions. I wasn't feeling great. I had a lot of GI issues, which we'll get into in a little bit. And really, what happened was during the pandemic, everything came to a complete stop, right?
Yeah.
I was laid off from my job, and I really had time that I never had before to just
Sure.
be with myself and explore some other things. And I took a few like online mini courses for like different things, and I took the Science of Well-Being, which is like a
Okay.
free course on Coursera. And it really just helped me lean into some of my character strengths, how I wanted to live, and how I maybe wanted to like shift some things in my life. And
Okay.
ultimately, I came upon health coaching and health and wellness. And it was something I actually had thought about like 5 years prior. It was like
Okay.
a full circle moment. I had lost another job and I was like, again, in a place where I was kind of like, okay, like I'm looking for a new job, but like, what do I really want? Right. And I ended up pursuing like a call with, I think, a program for health coaching. And I kind of like chickened out on the whole thing. And I just like forgot about it. I
Yeah.
I have a fashion background.
Mhm.
So I got another job in fashion design and I kind of like moved on with my life and like completely forgot about that. So there I was like 5 years later, kind of in a very similar situation. And it just came up for me again. And I just decided to go for it because it was obviously something that had been on my heart for so long and
Sure.
kind
Yeah.
of trying to push it away. I think, you can probably relate with this too. Like, I think we go to school for one thing, right? And we feel like
Yeah.
we have to stay on that track. And I think
Sure.
a lot of that has to do with, programmings and belief systems and like what we think we need to do.
Yeah.
Right. Sorry, my dog is like really chewing on a toy right now. Can you hear
That's
that?
it. No, not at all. You're good.
Amazing. Okay, I don't have to worry
I
about
get
it.
it. I get
It's
it.
only distracting me then.
Yeah, it's all good.
So you feel like you kind of have to stay on one track and like stay committed to something, especially like when you spend so much money
Of course.
on
Oh yeah.
people, you
Yeah.
feel really guilty
Yeah.
about thinking, even thinking about doing something else. And I think
Sure.
definitely the case for me. But I was at this point where like I wasn't really necessarily going to get a job anytime soon. During the pandemic, there was a lot of like uncertainty and unknown, as everyone, is aware of. So I kind of just decided that I was going to take the free time that I had to invest it in something that I wanted to learn more about and
Sure.
potentially start a new career in, or also just learn for myself
Okay.
and working on my own health and wellness anymore. More because, like I shared, like I was definitely in a place of like burnout and just like going through the motions. And there was a lot of things that I was doing that I thought was the right thing to do for
Oh
my gut,
yeah.
or like I thought I needed to do X kind of workouts to be fit, right? And that really like wasn't the case. I think my body was in a place of like severe stress, which we all know
Yeah.
leads to inflammation, and I think
Yeah.
contributed to a lot of my health issues. So that's kind of like the winding road of how I got to coming into the business of health coaching, and even just exploring it for myself, because I didn't always necessarily think that I was going to like, work in the business. And I kind of just was doing it also, like I shared, for my own purpose of healing, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
like, trying to learn something new and a different way. So yeah, that's kind of how I got into all of this.
Yeah, I love that. And I think we have very similar stories in that way, where we were doing one thing and then we kind of pivoted a little and decided maybe this was more in alignment with what I was called to do. And it sounds like the universe was kind of representing it to you as you were trying to, oh, okay, not right now, or oh, this isn't my time, or whatever the case might be. And then you finally decided, okay, this is where I'm might find value in, and maybe it was more inspired by your own health struggles, it sounds like, but ultimately it's where you were meant to be, and that's really
Exactly.
cool.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
was it through the experiences of going through the certification and so forth that you started to uncover what you needed to do for your own health? How did that kind of all coincide?
Yeah, I mean, I learned a lot. I took a health coach training program through the Institute of Integrative Nutrition, and I was really opened up to a whole new perspective to
Sure.
health and well-being and how to take care of yourself. I'm sure like you can say the same. It's like for so many years, there were so many things that like I thought I was doing right. And um, I think in terms of nutrition and lifestyle in this country, like we're told like we have to do things like a certain way. And a lot of the information isn't necessarily the right information that we all hear on a day-to-day basis. So it
Sure.
really just opened my eyes to a different way of thinking. And I think I always thought about health, you think about nutrition, you think about like going to the gym, and I never really thought about how the other areas of my life were potentially impacting my health,
Sure.
that were causing me stress, negative emotions and trauma and all of these things, and how they manifest in terms of our health. And just, a healthy lifestyle is much more than just the food on your plate and the workouts that you're doing.
Sure.
It really like opened my eyes up to this. And it really just helped me start to integrate different things into my life that resonated with me, that could, potentially help me. And I experimented with a lot of different things. And I always share with people it's really important to experiment and find what works for your unique body rather than just doing all of the things that you think you should
Sure.
do,
Yeah.
right? So as I started to experiment and integrate different things, I definitely noticed positive changes in my health. And I think some of the biggest things that I noticed, I ended up focusing a lot on gut health, and I ended up getting another certification in that. But even before that, there were things that I noticed that I had always struggled with in my health for a really long time,
Hmm.
specifically like my menstrual cycle. And,
Hmm.
you know, I had really painful periods
Yeah.
my entire life. And as soon as I started, eating better, focusing on stress management and mindfulness and all of these things. And also like removing some really toxic things from my lifestyle, whether that was in like household products or beauty products. The water that I was drinking, we're exposed to so many toxins on a daily basis. Once I started like, removing some of those things and then adding in some of these healthy practices with nutrition and lifestyle, such as like mindfulness and stress, because those
Yeah.
were really big things for me.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
actually noticed like a night and day difference between
Wow.
like my menstrual cramps and the symptoms that I always experienced for my entire life up until that point around that. So that was one of the most noticeable changes
Sure.
that I experienced. Um, and even with like sleep, like,
Mm.
sleep hygiene is so important. And I always just thought I was like a really bad sleeper. And,
Okay.
I realized a lot of it had to do with the habits that I had throughout the day and the habits that
Sure.
I had before I went to bed. And when I started to change those things, like again, night and day difference, like I was like, wow, actually, I'm not a bad sleeper. I can sleep. I can get
Yeah.
calm.
Yeah. Right. Right.
Um, so yeah, through my own learnings, I started integrating all of these things. And I really started to understand, the power of like the mind-body connection, um,
Sure.
and how important like really every aspect of your life is for your physical and mental well-being.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that so much. And I feel as though every single person should be required to take some of these courses that give us this information because it is wild how transformative it can be and how it's not common knowledge and we're not all just talking about this,
Yeah,
because of how powerful it is. And obviously you're speaking to your personal experience and how much it transformed your life. And then obviously now the work you do with clients and it's just incredible. And how is it not something that is more commonly discussed within our
that's why
education?
that's
Yeah.
why you and I do what we do,
Yeah.
right? Like to
Yeah.
help people with these things because it isn't common knowledge and not everyone's going after it and digging for it like
Sure.
we did, right?
Sure.
Just because like people don't even know that it's there, right?
Yeah.
They don't even know
Yeah.
that it's an option for them.
Sure.
And I'm not hating on all medications or anything of that nature, but like it's just we're so quick to be like, how can I fix this with a
Sure.
medication? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So um, yeah, that's why you and I do what we do.
Yes.
And that's why it feels so important to us because
Yeah.
we have experienced the change,
Sure.
right?
Yeah. 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 And I appreciate that you're able to also speak to the fact that health really is limited in so many ways to going to the gym and what you're eating. And while it can be a little overwhelming and a little bit daunting at first, what I know you've come to recognize, I have come to recognize, and most people within a more holistic space has also come to recognize is the fact that there are so many factors to our health. You said there's so many pieces to our lifestyle that impact our health, and so many things that we have normalized within our culture over the course of the day impact how we feel and how our mental and physical health reflects. So just really understanding that, not to the point of like, holy cow, I need to completely uproot and overhaul my whole life, but to some extent acknowledging that just because these habits or just because these products or just because this food is so normalized within our culture doesn't mean that it's all within our best interest, and slowly starting to come to terms with that and then make adjustments. It is a uphill and upstream battle for sure. However, the impact, and obviously you're speaking from your experience, is incredible. So I'm glad you touched on that because it is oftentimes minimized to just, well, I need to go to the gym and I need to eat well,
Yeah.
but there's
And
so many other factors there.
yeah, like as you know, like so many women with like weight struggles, who are trying to lose weight and be more healthy, they go to the doctor and the doctor's like, eat less, exercise more, and they're like already doing these things, right?
Yes.
Like to a point of, detriment to their
Yeah,
health,
totally.
right? They're doing all the hit workouts and they're exhausting themselves every single day. And then they're like going home and they're eating a salad and like they're not getting in enough protein, right? And it's really unfortunate that like that's like typically all the information,
Yeah,
sometimes women are given when they go to the doctor
sure,
concerned about their weight,
sure,
right?
sure. Yeah. And it's just very backwards and it's too narrow and it's harmful, like you're saying. And It's a reform that we are all actively trying to, encourage, at least with the work that we do, is just by educating and empowering around how that is not necessarily the most effective strategy. And if anything, it can make it worse.
I mean, 100%. And, I used to be that person.
Yeah.
Literally used to be that person. And I didn't struggle really with my weight, but I
Yeah.
struggled with my gut health issues.
Yeah.
As you know, like, eating too many salads and like too many high intensity workouts will, really impact your gut health potentially
Sure.
in a negative way if
Yeah.
you have gut health
Yeah.
struggles. It just like fuels the fire. So, I've experienced that in a different way.
Sure.
Um, but for sure, I've struggled with these things myself.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think your story resonates with probably a lot of women out there. I know, as I know mine does, and other women that you and I have connected with, there's a lot of shared experience here. And luckily, we have been able to do something about our own health as a result of our own education and so forth. But there's just so many others who need support too. So you and I have also connected in a way around gallbladder health. I've
Yeah,
shared with my listeners I have been on an ongoing gallbladder journey, if you will, and I know you several years back had to have your gallbladder removed. So I'd like to touch on this just briefly because it is a big part of your health journey, and I think this is an area of health that's not talked about enough. I don't think anyone knows what even a gallbladder does and its value. And I think part of that has to do with the fact that we can, quote, and I'm putting air quotes here, live without a gallbladder. And
Mhm.
so it's one of the most common surgeries in our country, and it's not really talked about enough. And I want to hear from your experience and what you've learned over the course of that specific journey.
Totally. So my experience with my gallbladder was one that was a little bit unique in a sense that to my knowledge, which, potentially I could have had issues with this and just didn't know. I never had issues with my gallbladder that presented themselves in a way that, like let me know that there was an issue, right?
Sure.
I had never been to a doctor that suggested such. But I do think like there might have been things that I was ignoring with my health that, could have been related,
Sure.
perhaps, right? But I had to have emergency gallbladder surgery due to like acute inflammation of the gallbladder, right? So I literally, I was having stomach cramps one night. I was rushed to the emergency room. I was actually misdiagnosed with something else. I was sent home. And a few days later, my symptoms continued to progress. And so when you have like inflammation of the gallbladder, it's like extreme bloating and pressure. And that was what I was experiencing, right? Like stomach aches, all of the things, and like severe. Like it was, almost like I was pregnant or something. That's how my belly looked.
Mm,
So I ended up having a follow up with another GI doctor, and I was told that it was actually my gallbladder. And I had never even really, heard anyone talk to me about the gallbladder before.
sure.
And he was basically like, you need to go to the emergency room and get it removed. So, like, there was no time to think about what was happening. There was no time to research and understand anything. So I ended up having my gallbladder removed. And I remember, asking the surgeon, like, why is this happening?
Yeah,
Like, what
yeah,
happened? Right? Like, I remember, like, he removed it and, I saw him after and I was like, well, I just want to know, like, what's going on? Like, why did this happen to me?
sure.
He was like, I can't tell you. And I was just like, okay, like this is okay. Like it was very traumatizing. And it was also just, I was young at this point. So, and not to say that that's an excuse for anything, but I was not an investigator of my own health at this
Yeah,
point in
yeah,
my journey. There was no health journey at this point.
right. Well,
Uh,
and not to interrupt you, Ali, but I think that's kind of the way that it works in our healthcare is unless you are someone who is educated enough to know that they need to dig a little deeper, we are assuming that we're getting all the information that we
totally.
need, or that there isn't an explanation if the doctor is telling us that that is in fact the case, right? So it makes sense, even if you were young, and even if you aren't young and you don't know that this is something that you can look closer at, you feel as though, well, they would tell me, or they would give me the guidance, or the doctor says this. So
Percent.
that's
We put our trust in the
yes.
healthcare system.
Right.
That's what most people do, right? And they think that they're getting all of the information that they need to take care of themselves or make the best decision,
Of course.
right? So I kind of just, they send you home from the hospital. I think I was told to eat like a low fat diet for a little bit, like no fried, greasy foods, like buy all like the low fat stuff if you're going to eat yogurt, low fat, all that stuff, right? So like I did that for a little bit. And I guess I kind of like moved on with my life. I had some follow-up appointments, but still like never really given any like clear, concrete information about how my body may change post-surgery and how I can best support my body,
Sure.
right? So I kind of just, like I said, I was younger at the time. This was like 10 years ago. I was very young to have my gallbladder removed. Like I know it's a common surgery with women that are middle aged or like in their 30s and 40s. But, I was, in my 20s at my mid 20s at this time. So it was very unusual. And I kind of just like moved on with my life. As I said, I was always like kind of like the go person, like, pushing myself to like do everything work wise and social life and all that kind of stuff. So I was never the person to like take time to like figure out what's going on, slow down. I was just like, move on, right?
Yeah.
I got to go to work. I got to do the things like that's
Yeah.
it. So that's like kind of what I did. And, to make a long story short, over the next few years, into my late 20s and yeah, into my late 20s, I definitely experienced my fair share of like gut health struggles and digestive issues. Um, and I still wasn't trying to put the pieces of the puzzle together at that point.
Sure.
I had seen several GI doctors, and whenever I brought up gallbladder surgery, they were like, I don't want to hear about the surgery that you had X amount of years ago. Like maybe you have IBS, right? I mean, all of the things, right? No one really wanted to like understand what might have been happening in correlation with my health history and
Sure.
it happened previously, even though
Sure.
I always kind of like knew like this was an important part of my health, right?
Yeah.
Um, so I got to a point where I was just like, I'm not even gonna like go to these doctors anymore.
Yeah.
Like no one's helping me,
Sure.
right? And I think when I stumbled upon health coaching again for the second time, um, I wasn't specifically thinking like, let me heal my gut or anything like that. It was
Yeah.
just more like an intuitive thing that like I knew I had to do. Like I said, I was kind of like trying to explore different things and like I had free time and I just
Sure.
knew I wanted to use it well.
Yeah.
So I wasn't thinking like, oh, I'll learn more about my gallbladder. I'll learn more about my gut health. I was kind of just like, this is what I need to do right now. So like the gallbladder, it didn't necessarily come into play at that moment in my mind, but I
Okay.
do think intuitively, like it had something to do with it, right?
Totally.
Because that's been a part of my life and a part of my journey. And whether I was making the connection at that point or not, it was impacting my health.
Sure.
Um, like I said, I struggled with a lot of digestive issues and discomfort around certain foods.
Yeah.
And, just to give a little bit of context about, the gallbladder and like what it does. So the gallbladder stores bile from the liver and it releases it into your GI tract during digestion. And it's mainly helping to break down fats. And it also plays a role in like the flow of bile into your GI tract and the
Okay.
concentration of that bile. So your digestion, the physiology of your digestion is changed without a gallbladder.
Sure.
Um, and there are a lot of digestive issues that you can experience, without a gallbladder
Yeah.
because so I definitely had my fair share of those issues. Really not being able to break down fats. Like I always kind of had that in the back of my mind that I have to be careful around fats. But like, as someone that was in their 20s, like I was kind of just like,
Yeah.
whatever at that
Yeah.
point,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But I had experienced things like literally having to like run to the bathroom because like I was gonna like explode or something. And like
Yeah.
this happened from time to time for me. And again, like I wasn't necessarily always connecting the dots. I was always like kind of like And while yes, it was certain foods that would trigger that for me, I was always thinking like, oh, it was that thing that I ate, right? And
Yeah.
I was thinking about like the gallbladder
Right.
for that, just like, like I said, like I kind of just like lived this life where I was like always on the go, and like I was never like stopping to think about these things. Um, and then like, I experienced my fair share of like bloating and discomfort and stomach aches and things like that. And a lot of that had to do with my impaired digestion.
Sure.
And there's a lot of downstream issues that can result after gallbladder surgery
Sure.
because of all of this, this process being disrupted.
Sure.
For example, like a few things are like that come up for a lot of people post-surgery are like SIBO, which is small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. Just because like, the bile helps with preventing that.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
have impaired bile flow, it results in like more bacteria in certain places.
Sure.
So to my knowledge, never had SIBO, but
Okay.
I thought I did at one point. But yeah, there's other gut related issues, of course, that can result from it as well.
Right. It's amazing. It's incredible how you just said the physiology of your digestion is changed. And that is the reality of this surgery. And if we're looking at individuals who are undergoing this surgery without prior knowledge of the impact that it can have, first and foremost, now in some cases it is emergency and it has to happen. I think it's happening too commonly, and there's a whole bunch of issues in that in that arena. However, it's interesting because if you're going in for this surgery and you already have pre-existing issues with your digestion or your liver, your gut, anything in that arena, anything in the world of digestion, which we know is and even, um, just your health in general, you're then putting yourself further into a space of compromise, whether it's because you have to or not, and then you're not getting any guidance thereafter. So it's just furthering these issues. They're allowing these surgeries to happen and not giving the information that clients or patients need in order to take care of themselves moving forward, and then it just perpetuating dysfunction. It's just adding fuel to
Exactly.
the fire, essentially in a long
Exactly.
in a
And
whole
like
roundabout way. Yeah.
get your gallbladder removed to like avoid having continuous chronic
Sure.
symptoms. But
Sure.
then like because of that impairment,
Yeah.
it's like, well, there's going to be downstream effects if you're not taking care of yourself properly. And
Mhm.
there is just such a lack of knowledge around, what to do post surgery. And like, it's just, I think there's so much room for our healthcare system to do better in so many aspects. But this is just one of those things that is, like you said, super, super common. And it's just like everyone is so in the dark about information
Totally.
on this. And because it's so common, like it needs to be talked about more. It
Sure.
needs to be, the information needs to be available to people
Yeah.
if this is what's happening,
Yeah. Agreed. I wanted to just, before we move on, ask you, when the surgeon told you, I can't tell you, was that because he was just not going to tell you or because he didn't know?
To my understanding, it was like he didn't know, like he
Okay.
could pinpoint a specific reason
Sure.
why. Um,
Okay.
and I just kind of like moved on with my life. And, I'm not telling people that like this is always the case, like 10 out of 10. But a few years later, upon like doing some reading, I saw that, the pill, hormonal birth control, can cause inflammation of the gallbladder. And
Okay.
at that point, I had literally been on the pill for like 9 years,
Okay. Yeah.
surgery. And, it can cause other gut health issues too.
Sure.
It's really, there are side effects. And I think there's a lot of side effects that people don't talk about. And, that's not informed consent for people.
Sure.
Like if you're taking something, you should understand what the side effects are.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Uh, and perhaps like they might not be telling people like inflammation of the gallbladder, but like inflammation of the GI tract, whatever, like, it's I went off the pill and like I said, my menstrual cycle completely changed for the better. And a lot of that had to do with the lifestyle changes I was making at the same time.
Sure.
Um, but yes, I wasn't given any of that information when I had my gallbladder removed. And like years later, I like uncovered this bit of information. I was like, oh, okay.
Okay.
I
Interesting,
probably
right?
I probably know what happened there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And obviously nothing's for certain. There could have been other things that were impacting my
Sure.
gallbladder function.
Yeah.
Um, but that's one of my hunches.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Yeah, so I guess more of the story here is from your experience is be an investigator of your health, and then also when it comes to gallbladder and gallbladder awareness, doing your own due diligence to really inform yourself about if in fact this is a surgery that's necessary, what can I be doing to support my body after the fact to help ease healing and to also just assist my body in functioning now without this gallbladder that served a purpose, even if I wasn't told that that was the case, you know? Yeah. All right. So now that we've kind of gotten a good understanding of the many years that you maybe struggled with gut health related issues, tell us a little bit more about your work with clients and how this inspired the work that you do now, what you see in clients most commonly, how you address clients and their GI issues. I'm very curious to hear kind of comprehensively what that looks like for you.
Sure. So I took an initial health coach training program and then I pursued a gut health program as well. Again, a lot of that was inspired by my own health issues
Okay.
and the health issues that I see with people every single day, whether that's from friends. I had already started working with clients at that time, and it just seemed like, everyone that I knew had experienced bloating, digestive issues. I think you can relate with that, and you probably would say the same.
Yeah.
So it was definitely something that I knew I wanted to focus on. And as I learned more about gut health, I really started to understand how it is truly the foundation of our well-being, from our physical health to our mental health. Um, so I knew it was something that I wanted to carry into my work. I learned a lot about, not only nutrition, but different lifestyle in aspects, again, like the mind-body connection and how integral that is to our gut health as well.
Sure.
So that definitely inspired a lot of work with my clients, and it is a foundation of my work, whether people want to focus on gut health or not, or they think they need to or not. Because as you know, like gut health issues don't just present themselves as bloating,
Totally.
and irregular bowel movements. Like it can be fatigue, it could be brain fog, it could be depression, it could be ADHD. It could be so many things. It could be impacting your hormonal function as a woman as well. Gut health and hormones are deeply connected. So
Sure.
I knew that that was something that, whether or not someone came to me with like visible, apparent gut health issues, it's going to be a foundation of what I focus on with them.
Sure.
So of course I focus a lot on nutrition. I focus on nutrition for gut health. That's something that I'm very passionate about, and like I love being in the kitchen. So like really helping people from a standpoint of like what a realistic day of healthy eating looks like, and helping them plan their days, and not just giving them all the information, but also helping them build this into their life instead of
Yeah.
just like, do this, do that,
Sure.
right? So gut health, nutrition, and we shared about this a little bit before, but really helping people become like an investigator of
Yeah.
their body, to start listening to the signals that their body's telling them. I always tell people like cravings, but cravings and symptoms are
Yeah.
both signs from our bodies. Cravings
Sure.
are a symptom technically, right? So like it's like instead of thinking of your cravings as bad all the
Yeah.
time, like start to just think of them as information, right?
Yes, I
Like,
love that.
okay, what
Yeah.
can I learn from this?
Yeah.
So really helping people be an investigator and also like put pieces together, because so often we're looking at pieces of our health so separately when really
Absolutely.
they are connected,
Yeah.
right? So, sometimes that means like taking a look at a client's health history and really starting to put the pieces of the puzzle together for them,
Totally.
and help them explore how these things could be connected, whether that's by like asking them more questions or, referring them out to get more testing done.
Sure.
But I think that's so, so important. And people need to get used to doing this on their own because, you know, we kind of touched on this already too, because like doctors aren't necessarily giving you all of the information that you need. You have to be the one that's investigating and advocating for
Yeah.
yourself. So that's something that I always help people with. Um, and like I said, gut parts. So a lot of like stress management and mindfulness, and really like incorporating different forms of movement into their lifestyle that can both support their overall physical and mental well-being, but also their gut health. Um, and just like building different habits, like as you know, building habits and becoming consistent with them is like hard work.
Yeah.
So really helping people, reevaluate what their day-to-day looks like and where they
Sure.
can show up better and start integrating some of these habits because we can, as coaches, like you can share all the information and you can give them all the things to do, but if you don't help them integrate it
Sure.
into in an easy way, like
Sure.
it'll just be one of those things that they never get to, right?
Yeah.
So I think really helping people, build out those habits and, the way of life that is a more holistic and integrative approach, right? Because it's a lifestyle. It's not just like a fad diet,
Yeah.
not telling them to count calories. Like I know you don't do that either.
Yeah.
Um, and it's for the long haul. And I
Sure.
think you know, really providing support and encouragement to clients is important too, because like these changes don't happen overnight and like you
Yeah.
don't see
Yeah.
results overnight. So you're really helping people build a new way of life. And
Yeah.
that's really how I like to look at it.
Sure.
And it's nutrition, but it's so so much more, and there's
Yeah.
certain clients that need to focus more on nutrition, and there's other clients that need to focus more on their relationship with food, right, which is
Yeah.
another really important one, um, when it comes to forming healthier eating habits.
Sure.
That's definitely something that I also assist my clients with as well. And as far as like how I work with people, you don't see change overnight. So usually working with clients for a few months. Sometimes clients really like the accountability because that's a
Sure.
part of coaching as well. And
Yeah.
that's one of the reasons why, coaches are successful is they're providing the accountability for clients.
Sure.
So some clients want to continue on for the accountability, which is great, but like, the goal is to really set people up for success with this healthy lifestyle and way of living in a few months, right?
Absolutely.
I also support people with doing things like pantry audits
Yeah.
and doing meal plans, which I absolutely love to do. I think it's like so fun.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, those are like the main ways that I work with people. And
Okay.
in a nutshell, those are the things that we focus on. Obviously, there's so much more, but that's kind of like an overarching, you know, recap.
Yeah. 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 No, that's great. I think what I appreciate most, and I know we definitely align in this way, is it's really about creating the lifestyle. And it's cliche, and I think I get it. Oh, it's not a diet, it's a lifestyle. But the fact of the matter is, like, that is exactly what it is. It's about creating a life that promotes your health. And unfortunately, our modern world has curated lives for us that does not do that. And so it does take a lot of proactivity and focus and commitment in order to do that for yourself. But the long-term impact and the effect that that can have on your health and your healing is priceless. It's incredible. And I just think about the way I live my life now. And if I had looked at myself you know, at say I was at 20 years old and looked at who I am now at 30, and I would be mind blown at the life that I live. But it's all in accordance with this concept that they're sharing is how can I take care of myself best? And all within the name of balance. It's obviously not going to be this restrictive, really rigid lifestyle, but ultimately that's always the goal. And that's the difference between somebody who's looking at things more holistically, more through that integrative lens versus here's just a diet and I'm gonna, do this for 6 weeks and we'll see how it goes and I'll go back to the way that I was living before. And that's such a stark disparity there where it's, it's definitely much more work, but what you're getting from it is a completely changed life, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. And like another thing that like I didn't mention is like, yes, you're building a lifestyle and, as a coach, I'm giving you, different nutrition and lifestyle tips. And we also have to like recognize that like everything needs to be personalized because
Sure.
there's no one thing that's going to work for everyone. And maybe
Totally.
it's like another big misconception in the world of nutrition and health. And I also think that's why, specific diets don't work. And of course, I think
Sure.
there's a time and a place for diets in a therapeutic sense if you're trying to heal an autoimmune condition. You know what I mean?
Sure.
I totally believe in that. But I
Yeah.
think your average person that's just trying to form a healthier lifestyle and like feel better and have more energy, like there is no one diet, right? It's
Totally.
like
Yeah.
we focus on eating real whole foods, right? But we also need to find the foods that work for you, right?
Totally.
Because it's not
Totally.
going to be the same for everyone.
Yeah. Well,
And
especially,
that goes with
but
your other habits too,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like movement and like how you practice mindfulness. It's going to be different for everyone, and different things are going to make people feel good, and different things are going to make people feel bad.
Sure. Absolutely. And I think that's both the beautiful and complex part about health is we as humans want so desperately to find the one thing that works. And well, it worked for so and so, so I'm gonna, try to do it for myself. And I think that's where things become so nuanced when we try to apply certain things and it doesn't work, then we give up and then we go back to our old ways when it's not something that we're individualizing for ourselves and our own health. And it can become really frustrating. So I appreciate that because while that might feel discouraging for some, I think it's also what allows us to be most sustainable because if we're able to find what works for us, our circumstances, our bodies, and more, it will easily enter our lives and we'll be able to incorporate it because it helps us feel good. We're able to sustain it versus I'm trying to fit a square peg into a round hole because it worked for someone else and it's not working for me, but I'm going to still push myself to do it because I think this is the right thing to do. So I think that's a very important piece to the puzzle because it might take time, but it's so worthwhile.
Totally. Like I very much resonate with that because I think for so many years I kind of, before I began my health journey and I would say before and after my gallbladder surgery, like I generally like tried to eat pretty healthy on a regular basis,
Sure.
and I thought I did. I was doing a lot of workout classes, a lot of HIIT, a lot of running, and all of these things that like I like thought I should be doing. And of course, some of those things felt good for a certain amount of time. But when I look back now, I realize how I was really like fighting myself,
Sure.
basically. And, I instead of like thinking about what my body really needed and how I was feeling and how all of these things were making me feel, I was just like, well, this is what I should be doing, right? This is what people do when they're trying to maintain their weight or they're trying to be healthy, like all this kind of stuff. Um, so I very much resonate with that in my own journey, because I think there was so many years where I thought I was doing the right things, and what I really needed to do was slow down and like
Yeah.
listen to what my body was telling me.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that ties back into what you were saying before about symptoms. Looking at them as information, as messages from the body, as opposed to resenting them and becoming frustrated and discouraged by them, which is fair. Everyone's valid in feeling that way,
Yeah,
especially when symptoms have been present or they're disruptive to your ability to function. But
yeah,
also being patient with them and tuning into them and not putting just the band-aid on them, which is oftentimes our go-to. Um,
totally.
so what are the most common issues you see in clients related to GI? Is it certain symptoms that people have? I feel like that's definitely
So
an area that I
yeah,
see most is like
yeah,
certain symptoms that are very, normalized.
100%. So like most people will come to me and they sometimes like not even for gut health, and like we discover at a later time, but irregular bowel movements, and whether that's diarrhea or constipation, gas, bloating, digestive discomfort. These are all like very common, and I think like most people will say they have some or one of these symptoms,
Totally. Yeah.
right? And really, they're all just like a collection of symptoms that your gut is struggling. And typically in women, like it's more so identified in women as like IBS, right? Like so many women are told they have IBS, which like is not an actual diagnosis. And it's really probably a sign of a deeper rooted issue. Again, like things like SIBO, leaky
Yeah.
gut, food intolerances.
Yeah, can you just speak on that for just a sec? Because I think
Yeah,
this is like a really problematic area that we're seeing is like this IBS diagnosis that's just being given to people without really a whole lot of guidance. And like you're saying, there's so much more underneath that is
right,
more maybe functionally acknowledged because we know in functional medicine, leaky gut is considered. We know things of that capacity are much more
right.
widely addressed because of the testing that exists there. But I'm curious just briefly about your insight on
And
this
I
kind of
and I will say, like you said, leaky gut and food intolerances are more acknowledged in the functional space. And if you say those words to a GI doctor, they might look at you a little bit weird. Leaky gut is also intestinal permeability, so like that's a secondary term for that. But like when most women like go to the doctor, or like I guess even men, but like IBS is more common in women, and there could be many factors for that, which I'm not going to like necessarily get into at this moment. But when someone goes to the doctor, a GI doctor, like a regular doctor, not like a functional practitioner with like
sure.
irregular bowels, gas, bloating, it's like, okay, you have IBS, right?
Yeah.
Especially if they perhaps have done other testing and they don't, like a doctor could do, a different type of stool test, or they could do, other testing, endoscopies and colonoscopies and stuff. And like maybe they do those things and they don't find anything. And it's just like, okay, well, you have IBS, right? And like I said, it's not a real diagnosis because it's only like really, it's only an acknowledgement of symptoms.
Like a
It's not,
syndrome.
there's no like why.
Yeah.
No, like let's understand why
Right.
you have all of these symptoms, right? And when we look at it from a functional lens, we're like, okay, you have IBS, but like, what's going on? Why are you experiencing these
Sure.
symptoms? Symptoms are not a diagnosis,
Yeah.
right? So there's things, often IBS is often correlated with things like SIBO, leaky gut, and food intolerances. And I will say, so yeah, I would say like one of the most common GI issues I would say is IBS and all of the symptoms that are around that. And what I suspect for most people, which it's 100% more common than one thinks, leaky gut is often at the root of symptoms like that. And most people have leaky gut, and that
Yeah.
comes down to the lifestyle. It comes down to stress and
Yeah.
toxins that are
Yeah.
present in our everyday life.
Yeah.
And like I said, like I suspect that most of this is, rooted in things like leaky gut. I don't do testing myself, so
Sure.
I don't know for every client that it is, but
Yeah.
honestly, I've referred clients out to practitioners before to get testing done, and leaky gut is something that comes back.
Yeah. I feel like you have to almost be, in order to not have leaky gut. Now, obviously it's a spectrum, so there's severity to it, in terms, and we all kind of to some extent have permeability in some form or
Yep.
fashion, but you almost have to be so knowledgeable and so proactive about healing your gut that the average person, and I don't want to generally say because it's not fair, and I think that's not always the case, but I think the average person is more likely to have leaky gut than to not because of how much goes into healing a leaky gut. And no one
100%.
is just doing this on like a day-to-day basis if they don't know that it's happening, you know?
And how much, toxins we're exposed to on a
Yes,
day-to-day
out
basis.
of our
So for
control.
the average
Yeah,
person that is not like paying attention like we
yeah,
are,
yeah,
and like I will wholeheartedly admit this, like when I had a GI map done like 2 years ago, this was after I had like started my health journey. After I had explored gut health and learned all about it and started implementing some things,
yeah.
I had removed gluten because I suspected I had a intolerance, and my test still came back that I had leaky gut,
Yeah.
had a gluten intolerance.
Yeah.
So it's like even after like doing quite a bit,
Yeah.
I still had,
Still.
right?
Totally. Right.
So and then for those that don't know, because I want to explain a little bit about leaky gut. So leaky gut is basically, intestinal permeability, and that means, when the tight junctions of your intestines becomes loose or compromised. So there's gaps, which means it allows particles that should not be in like your bloodstream to pass through the gut lining, right? So things like food and toxins and things that we don't want, right? And it causes a reaction in our body, and it could look like food sensitivities and intolerances. It can cause autoimmune conditions, which I'm sure, as everyone knows, are becoming more and more common. Things like Hashimoto's,
Totally.
psoriasis, Crohn's disease. Um, so it's something that most people are experiencing, whether they realize it or not,
Yeah.
right? But I would say that that's definitely something that's probably most present,
Yeah.
um, based on the fact that like everyone has irregular bowel movements,
Yeah.
gas, bloating, digestive discomfort. And most of these gut related issues are all like really driven by inflammation, which comes from stress is a huge one,
Totally.
diet, things in your diet, and other things in your lifestyle.
Yeah. 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 And it's just not something we're taught. It's not something we're aware of. We don't realize the connection. And like you're saying, some of the things that are really out of our control. And I know you mentioned stress, and that is such a huge umbrella. I mean, just what I know about mental health and trauma and adverse childhood experiences and the impact that stress has on our bodies and our brains and how it lives in the body. And I mean, I think above all, the good efforts we put in with nutrition and sleep and all of the things that are what are conventionally known as healthy, the stress piece, both the stress that is in our control and not in our control, has a significant, if not the most profound influence on our health. And it's something that is so cumbersome to tackle because a lot of it is stressors that happened to us maybe years and years and years ago, or stressors that we simply can't control, like world events or financial stress, or you know all of these pieces, both psychological and even just the physiological stressors of the foods we're eating. I mean, it is, holy cow, we could spend a whole episode just talking about the mind body connection, stress management, and the influence of it on our gut. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit about this because, I know there's lots of non negotiables for gut health, and I want to hear maybe your top three, top four that you would suggest. But before we dive into that, just focusing on the impact of stress on our gut and how the connection exists or why it exists, I think would be a really valuable topic to cover.
Yeah, yeah. So, yeah, I definitely think that stress and emotions are one of the biggest factors that people do not realize that are impacting their gut. And I think people are so quick to like point at certain foods as the culprits. And
Hmm.
while yes, there are certainly like some foods that are harmful to the gut, there are certainly foods that are inflammatory and we should
Sure.
avoid. You can be eating all of the healthy foods like, kale and broccoli, but like if your nervous system is a wreck, your gut like simply won't heal, right? Like the gut-brain connection is so, so real.
Yeah.
And, there's something called the gut brain axis, and that's the direct pathway that's between your brain and your gut, and it acts as a communication pathway between the two. And they're constantly sending signals to each other. And in terms of like explaining how this connection works, the vagus nerve is one of the most important features of this, and it's a cranial nerve that runs all the way from your brain to your colon. And, it oversees things outside of just digestion. It oversees many crucial bodily functions, and it's helping to carry those signals from the gut and the brain and the digestive system and other organs to the brain and like vice versa. So things like stress, shame, negative emotions, and trauma, all of these things can cause physiological changes in the body, like especially inflammation, right? Like that
Sure.
Inflammation is at the root of all disease, and a lot of that is coming from stress and
Yeah.
negative emotions and all of
Yeah.
these things.
Yeah.
They throw all these things can throw off hormones and really like dysregulate your nervous system. And
Yeah.
of course, like you were saying, some stress is normal, but chronic stress is when it starts to take a toll on our bodies and cause
Sure.
inflammation.
Yeah.
And that inflammation is going to inhibit a lot of the essential functions that your body is carrying out.
Yeah.
And when you're stressed, you're in this sympathetic state,
Yeah.
right? And your nervous system is activated. You're in fight or flight, right? And your body switches to focusing all of its, attention to the perceived stress
Totally.
rather than things like digesting food and like fighting off invaders,
Yeah.
right? Which is why, when you're stressed, you're going to feel more bloated after meals, and you're also more prone to illness, right? You might
Yeah.
get sick quicker and easier. Like if you're traveling and stuff, like you have more stress on the body, you get sick. Like,
Yeah.
or like if you're like, if you're stressed at work and like you're not sleeping well, like you're going to get sick, right? Your
Sure.
immune system is down. Your immune health is also deeply connected to your gut as well. Um, and any microbial balances in the gut and in the body, due to things like diet and lifestyle, can also cause that disruption between the gut brain connection.
Sure.
And it's not just digestive symptoms and physical symptoms that you see. Like it can
Yeah.
be the fatigue, it can be the brain fog, the mood swings, the depression, the anxiety. Um, and those are definitely things that people don't really always think about, right? They
Yeah.
don't necessarily think about like how their eating could be, making them, tired or like not as happy in a good mood,
Yeah.
right? Could be
Yeah.
putting them down. Your body responds to all of the things that you're putting into it.
Sure.
And of
Sure.
course, food. And if you're putting bad things into your body, the
Yeah.
response is not going to be pleasant,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
um, just as a little side note, like I think when you're making choices around food and habits, I always share this with clients because I think it's really, really effective. Think about how you want to feel.
Yeah.
You're making a decision about food, when you're making a decision about a workout or even like who you want to hang out with.
Yeah.
Think about how you want to feel
Yeah.
and make sure that the decision that you make aligns with
With
that.
that. Yeah.
It's like just a little thought exercise. Like sometimes just pause. Like
Yeah.
if you're like in that debilitating state where you like can't decide like what to eat. Is it going to be a sandwich? Is it going to be like um a bunch of veggies and some protein? Like think about it. Like
Yeah.
think about how you want to feel. Think about how that food's going to make you feel. Think
Sure.
about what else you have in your day that you might need to feel good for.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sometimes that that shift in that way of thinking can really provide you with the motivation
Yeah.
you need to
Right.
make a decision.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it also just builds awareness around how our actions impact us and in a very basic way, and that's where it's taking a microscopic look at your habits throughout the day and then being able to reflect on them more proactively around, well, how is this going to make me feel versus I'm just going to do it and not really give much thought to it around its impact. But that I think just furthers the disconnect, as you mentioned before, around what we're doing and how we're feeling or what we're eating or whatever, fill in the blank habit that we're talking about, what we're referring to. So it allows you to build awareness around what are the things that help me feel good, because I don't think that that's necessarily something we're doing enough of. And then you can also then prioritize those habits more than others.
Totally,
Yeah,
totally. And I think sometimes it's good to think this way because it's really sometimes hard to like envision the long-term goal that
sure.
you might have. Like,
Yeah.
like I find this specifically useful in a case of like weight loss where
Okay.
like sometimes it's like they just like don't, they have like decision fatigue or like they're like, they're craving something else.
Yeah.
The weight loss goal that they have seems far away, right? So
Yeah.
it's like, okay, what in the immediate sense, what can we think about? Like, it's
Yeah.
like, how do you want to feel,
Sure.
right? Like, if you have like a work presentation or you have an activity, even like with your kids, like in a few hours, like, do you want to feel like crap?
Yeah.
Like, or do you want to feel energized and good and ready,
Right.
right?
Right.
And food really truly does have an impact on that.
Yeah.
So, anyway, I feel like I
Yeah.
got a little sidetrack with that,
That's
but
okay.
I I think that's a really like good overview of like, a little more about the gut brain connection and like
Yes.
they are so deeply intertwined.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah, I
and
appreciate that. Go ahead.
yeah, as far as my three non-negotiables for gut health, I will say that number one is like mindfulness and stress
Yeah.
management.
Yeah.
Just it's just like I said, like your body's not going to heal if you're constantly in a state of fight or flight and you're
Yeah.
constantly stressed and inflamed. It's just you're not going to heal.
Yeah.
Um, so that's always number one, and that could be a variety of different things. It could mean, journaling, it could mean meditation, it could mean breathing exercises, it could mean talking to a therapist, right? There's so many different ways you
Sure.
can put stress management and mindfulness. It could mean a walk outside, spending time in nature. Like
Yeah.
it is something that, works for you,
Yeah.
right? And then I would say, as far as like nutrition, of course, that's important. And I would say incorporating more like anti-inflammatory foods into your diet is one of the best things that you can do.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit more about that in a bit. And then I would say number three is like eliminating toxins and gut disruptors from your
Yeah.
life. And that can be through, drinking filtered water. It could be through swapping out your household items and, skincare items for
Yeah.
non-toxic. It could mean, eliminating refined sugar and refined carbohydrates from your diet.
Sure.
Um, you know, I will say, either eliminating or reducing the amount of alcohol you take, really being careful about, if you do need to take an antibiotic, all of these things are gut disruptors, right?
Sure.
And we consider them when we're thinking about gut healing and optimal gut health.
Yeah. Yeah, that's important. And I'm so glad that you said the mindfulness piece. I think this is something I feel very passionate about just simply because in my clinical experience, I was not taught about this. And I'd imagine in the next 5, 10 years, we'll see maybe an emergence of more gut related care in the mental health field. But this is something that I feel is very much lacking, and I'm hopeful to provide at least some insight. I'm working on a project right now that will hopefully spark some awareness for future clinicians, at least within the
Mhm.
work that I'm doing. But isn't that incredible that the first suggestion that you make is mindfulness and stress management, which I think is something that people blow off more than anything. They think it has to be a supplement. They think it has to be just the diet. But sometimes the simplest things like incorporating deep breathing, which is something that each and every one of us can do at any point in time, and it's free. Sometimes that can be the simplest and most effective tool in our toolbox, but so many of us just, write it off as almost probably to the point of, I mean, I'm sure a lack of education has a role there, but also thinking this is so overly simple, this couldn't possibly be effective.
Yeah.
So I'm glad you touched on that. I'm glad that you're continuing to drive that point home because that's not something I think that people really consider. And I think, like I said, I think we really want more tangible things. Like we want to be able to know this food is good for my gut or this supplement is going to heal my, which you and I both know that no single food or single supplement is going to do that. But that's what we want as humans. We want to know it's like I can touch it, I can
Right.
hold it, I
Right.
know it's there as opposed to deep breathing. That's like what,
Right.
that seems so basic,
Right.
right?
Totally. Totally.
Yeah. So, what would you say is misunderstood about gut health?
Well, I feel like we kind of already covered this because I would say that like the connection between the
Yeah,
mind and the gut, I would say like that is one of the things that is definitely misunderstood.
sure.
The other thing you kind of already touched on this is that like no one supplement is
Yeah,
going to heal your gut. Like I feel like there's a lot of products out there and like I'm a fan of a lot of, consumer packaged good products in the health and wellness and nutrition space, but there are a lot of them that are not so good and there's a
yeah,
lot of false marketing and advertising around them, specifically in the gut health space and
yeah,
like okay, that probiotic soda, like it is certainly better than your Diet Coke or your Coca-Cola, like 100%. And I think it's a great healthy swap to make if you like soda.
Yeah.
Um, it's not doing anything for your
Yeah.
gut. Like, let's just be right. And
Yes.
it's like even those powders like that claim to have like everything in them. And
Yeah.
I'm not gonna like say brands because like I don't like
Yeah.
to do that, but like that all-in-one powder that has probiotics, prebiotics, vitamins, minerals, everything, like that's not necessarily going to be right for everyone. And even
Yeah.
though it's convenient and it has everything in it, like it's the more things that something has in it, the
Yes.
more things that can go
Yes.
wrong,
And
right?
also, the more we can call it into question, too. I just spoke
Yeah.
on this morning. I was talking about a protein powder and how many protein powders out there have digestive blends and antioxidant blends and all. And I'm like, why don't we just find a protein powder that is a protein powder that is serving the purpose of a protein powder, and that's it. That's all that we need. That's all. We don't need
It's
anything
it's
else.
it's really funny because especially with protein powders, you're right. And that's a big category where there's like a lot of ingredients
Yes.
typically in these products, right? And it's funny because some of them will have antioxidants and digestive enzymes, and then they have gums and natural flavors
Yes.
and
Yes.
all
Which
the
is
stuff
very,
that
yeah.
are gut disruptors.
Yes. Yeah.
So it's like, these brands, like, I think I they're making claims and a lot of them are like losing the plot, right?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like they've gone so far
Yeah.
off the deep end and like, they have all these things in their product and they're claiming to do all these sorts of things. And like, it's just like, again, more things for people's bodies to react to. Um, it's these things can't just be like a one size fits
Yes.
all in one.
Yes.
Like that doesn't work for the mass
Yes.
people.
Yes.
It doesn't,
Yes.
you know?
Sure.
So I would say like that's something that's pretty misunderstood with gut health, and like your gut is not ever going to heal overnight, especially if you have like pretty serious issues. Like it could take months to
Yeah.
heal your gut. It could take
Yeah.
a year to heal your gut. It's not going to happen overnight, and there's not going to be one thing that does it.
Yeah. 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 I appreciate that. I think this is really trending on social media now with, I'm seeing coconut cult and sea moss gel and all of these trendy foods and products and so forth that are getting this reputation as being exactly what you're saying, as being this superfood or the super gut healing, modality that's going to change the game. And don't get me wrong, I mean, I think coconut cold is great as
Favorite.
supplemental to all of these other practices, but we are so within the headspace that I think our healthcare system has created us to be, is that there is one pill for every ill, and this is not just medication
Right.
speaking, and I'm not speaking medication, I'm more specifically talking about supplements and approaches, and it's so much more comprehensive, which ties us back into what we said in the beginning about how it really is so much more than just taking a spoonful of coconut cult in the morning and then living life the way you want to live the rest of the day. It's how am I functioning, and how am I operating and moving through the day in a way that has my gut health in mind, essentially. And it's not about just the one thing that's going to make all the difference. So I think that's, like, to just echo what you're saying, that is so incredibly misunderstood within gut health, but then also health overall.
Yeah, and I just thought of one more thing as we were talking and probiotics came up.
Yeah.
Um, probiotics can be great. Not all are created equal, I will
Yeah.
say. Not everyone is good for everyone,
Sure.
right? And then I will say that if you are like experiencing extreme gut health symptoms and issues like SIBO, like probiotics could make things worse. So like
Totally.
we're so quick to just like grab for the probiotic. But oftentimes it makes people more bloated if their gut is in a state where there is already like severe inflammation and
Uh,
bacteria where it should
Overgrowth.
be.
Yeah.
So I would say that's like another thing that's very misunderstood because I feel like people just think like I'll take a probiotic and like yes, it can help. I recommend probiotics quite a bit, but it's also about knowing, what people understanding what people are going through and like,
Sure.
how they're feeling and what the state of their gut health is. And then
Yeah.
also like thinking about what probiotic could be best,
Yeah.
right? And it's not a one size fits all, and it's not something that everyone should take. Um, it definitely should be considered in a more, cautious way.
Yeah.
100.
Yeah. Yeah. I appreciate that. I think that that's definitely something that is just not only individuals just buying whatever's on the shelf, and I think that there's so much more to a probiotic than what the average person knows and understands. And then also specifically based on your needs, like you're saying, it can aggravate issues. It can make matters
Right.
worse. It can, cause discomfort or further the discomfort. So being aware of your specific needs and circumstances, I think is always the route, which I know it kind of that concept keeps being reiterated throughout this whole
Yeah.
conversation. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I know you've shared quite a bit on different lifestyle practices that can support a healthy gut. What are some ways that someone could start taking care of their gut today? Say, just as soon as they finish this episode, what could they start doing?
Okay. So like a few foundations that I always start with, simple as like hydration. You want to be making sure that you're hydrating more than you
Or
think. Most people are like chronically dehydrated, right?
totally.
Like you probably are dehydrated if you're wondering if you are. So you want to hydrate, and electrolytes definitely help move along that process for your body and assist in things like digestion. But like you don't have to buy fancy electrolyte packets. Like you can use salt, sea salt, high quality sea salt and lemon, maybe get some trace minerals in there, which are also really great. So I would say hydration is a foundation, right? And that's something everyone could like act on immediately, right?
Love that. Yeah.
And filtered water is great. If you can get a high quality water filter, that's also important. You want to make sure you're not drinking in any chemicals or bacteria and things like that. And then, of course, rest and sleep. So I think for me in my health journey and just in my life, like I shared earlier that like I just thought I didn't sleep well for most of my life.
Or yeah.
And I just, I thought I functioned fine without it, but like I got to like a breaking point in my life where I was just like tired all of the time and it was like embarrassing,
Yeah.
right? That's when I cut out coffee from my diet, which it was before I began my real health journey. I cut out coffee and my birth control pill, and it was just like my intuition telling me that I had to do these things.
Yeah.
Not saying that anyone else has to do the same. You have to figure out what works for you.
Sure.
A lot of what I was doing on a day to day was impairing my sleep, right?
Yeah.
And rest and sleep are so important for healing. So getting good quality sleep, 7 to 9 hours. And like I said, that might mean reevaluating some of your habits throughout the day and bedtime and creating a routine that relaxes you and prepares you for sleep. So hopefully everyone could like, start focusing a little bit more on their sleep and getting better sleep.
Yes. I'm a
That's your
big,
time for
big
your
fan of
body
sleep.
to restore,
Yeah.
not do allowing for that. Like it's going to be really hard for your gut to heal.
Totally.
Um, and just to like maintain good gut health too,
Yeah.
like maintain your overall health. So next I would say nervous system regulation. We already spoke a little bit about this. But really being able to put your body into that parasympathetic state that's needed for healing and proper function. So different ways you can practice this. I like to say, you're stimulating the vagus nerve, right? Which is that direct connection between your gut and your brain, right?
Sure.
So things that could help with that is breathing. We talked about that. I love the 4-7-8 breathing method. If you don't know what that is, look it up on YouTube. You can watch a quick video. It's something that you can literally implement at any time, no matter where
Yes.
you
Love that.
are.
Mm-hmm.
Um, things like cold plunge, of course, like meditation, any forms of gentle movement, like walking or yoga poses, like even putting your legs up on the wall stimulates your vagus nerve, things like laughing or chanting. So like there's so many things that you could do. And some of the things hopefully come natural to you, like laughing and things like that.
Yeah.
So that's a huge piece, I would say. And again, something that you can literally just do at any time. And nutrition, of course, is important. So, like a few things that are really easy to start thinking about and like implementing. Of course, focusing more on like real whole foods and crowding out some of the processed foods and refined sugars and refined carbohydrates and inflammatory oils. Those are like the big things that you want to try to avoid. most of the time. And, as far as, other foods to include, obviously a variety of fruits and vegetables is really important. So you want to think variety in color, you know, different colors have different functions in the body. So making sure you're getting in a good amount of fruits and vegetables each and every day. And like I always like to say, make sure half of your plate is vegetables at each meal.
Yeah.
And fermented foods, of course, have probiotics, which are beneficial to your gut. Again, like if you have severe bloating and gut issues, you might want to avoid these for a little bit or introduce them slowly. But fermented foods are things like kimchi, sauerkraut, always get the raw kind. That's the kind with the probiotics, not the kind that's like sitting on the shelf in a jar in like the pantry section. Kombucha, yogurt, kefir, these all have live probiotics in them. So those are really great for the gut, of course. And then fiber is super important. So, there's different types of fibers, but if you're eating, a variety of fruits and vegetables, nuts and seeds, and um, whole grains, you're getting in a variety of fiber.
Sure.
Um, and then, of course, like quality protein is important. And protein is really helpful for healing the gut lining, and it's very important. So you want to definitely make sure that you're getting in high quality proteins into your diet, whether that's coming from things like, you know, grass-fed meat, chicken, eggs, of course, wild-caught seafood, plant-based sources would be things like tofu, tempeh, beans, legumes, nuts, seeds, all of that good stuff. Um, and then healthy fats are really important, specifically omega-3s. They're very anti-inflammatory for the body, and healing for the gut, and very important for the brain. And again, that's like something, the gut-brain connection, right?
Yeah.
If it's healthy for your brain, it's healthy for your gut and vice
Yeah.
versa. And fat just like helps you feel full for longer and, prevents cravings and things like that. So healthy fats are definitely important.
Hmm.
Of course, if you're someone like me that doesn't have a gallbladder, you need to be a little bit more cautious and careful around the amount and types of fats that you're consuming.
Sure.
Not a one size fits all.
Yes, of course.
Um, and then, of course, spices and herbs are really amazing. There's so many health benefits and so many different healing properties to different types of spices and herbs.
Sure.
They reduce inflammation, they aid digestion. So I always recommend people adding more into your diet, however you can, whether that's sprinkling fresh herbs onto your meals or using and cooking with more spicings and seasonings.
Love that.
Things like basil and oregano are like antimicrobial and can combat the growth of bad bacteria in your gut. And things like cinnamon help with blood sugar balance, ginger helps with digestion. So there's so many different spices and herbs that you can add in to promote your gut health as
Yeah.
well.
I love that. I think that's such an underestimated tool because it seems so
Oh,
insignificant, but
yeah,
there's actually so much antioxidant value too in all of these herbs and seasonings and
exactly.
taking advantage of that. I mean, just a pinch goes a long way.
Totally.
Yeah. Oh my God, this has been so great, Allie. I'm so thankful to have been able to have this conversation. We touched on a lot. And I just think that the conversation could continue on because there's just so much to this topic, and it really is such a whole body consideration to be made when it comes to our gut health because we know all disease begins in the gut, and like you said, that's the root of so much. So I appreciate the knowledge that you shared with us today. Tell us where everyone can find you, or if they have interest in working with you, if something resonated where they're feeling like, yeah, I need this deeper level of support. I'd love to be able to connect, with Allie. Where can they find you?
Um, Thank you so much for having me. This has been
Yeah.
such a lovely conversation. It's like these are the types of conversations that really light me up, and
Yeah.
like you and I are doing with our health coaching, it's just we're all about like spreading our awareness and like
Yes.
helping people. So
Totally.
this has just been amazing. And as far as where people can find me, so I'm on social media, just my name, Ali Fiorella. You can find me on Instagram. I have my website, alifiorella.com. And yeah, I'd love to hear from you.
Yes. Well, thank you again for joining me today. Hopefully, in the future, we can maybe dive into a specific area of gut health, maybe more microscopically, so that it's less overall, which is great, but maybe even focusing on a specific area that you find is in need of deeper exploration, right? Because like we said, it's so nuanced. There's so many different topics within gut health that I think we could cover, different influences on it. So down the line, we'll have to plan to do that. But thank you so much again. And thank you to everyone tuning in today. I hope that you enjoyed. And until next time, be well.